for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson. We have a lot of topics today, including 2 bank failures that you can blame Trump for because he's responsible for them. We have a lot of updates concerning Ottawa Impact. There's been a lawsuit. There's been some other moves by the board. We'll talk about all of that. Plus, we have 2 Hammer Time segments this week, and this is going to be some good stuff here. And then we also have to talk about what's happening in Florida. So we'll get to all of that in just a moment. Before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and on Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica station. Before we start with today's topics, we have a couple of announcements to make. The first is that our friend Jeff Smith at Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy has written a book. It's called A People's History of Grand Rapids. And starting this Monday, March 20th, you can get your copy of the book at Schuler Books in Grand Rapids or directly from Jeff Smith. He's going to be working on some dates with Schuler Books, Books and Mortar, and several other local bookstores. So make sure you stay connected to GRID, GRIID.org, and Jeff Smith will announce some upcoming dates where you can pick up his book directly from him. Also, Southpaws is going to be on the road again. Jack Prince and I will be traveling to Mason, Michigan on Saturday, May 20th for a special live recording of Southpaws. We're going to be joined by Rita Vogel from the Mason City Council. Rita's going to talk to us about her efforts to have a day of commemoration for Malcolm X, who lived in Mason, Michigan during his teenage years. We're going to have a pretty good-sized crowd. We're hoping to have some very special guests, and we'll have more details on the special live broadcast of Southpaws coming up in the next few weeks. So be sure to listen to future episodes of Southpaws for more information about where and when we'll be in Mason, Michigan. We'll also keep you updated on our official social media accounts. Let's go ahead and start this week with updates on our favorite topic around here, Ottawa Impact. Yes, it's the continuing, never-ending saga of what's happening with the Republicans, with the right-wing nutjob cuckoos over in Ottawa County. This is Sarah Leach writing for the Holland Sentinel, which has done a fantastic job of tracking everything that's happening with Ottawa Impact. This story is dated March 8th. The embattled Ottawa County Board of Commissioners is facing a second lawsuit in as many months after several residents filed a lawsuit Wednesday alleging the Ottawa Impact majority violated Michigan's Open Meetings Act at its inaugural meeting. The plaintiffs, Peter Armstrong Sr., Susan Hookema, Jason Hunter, and Jeffrey Padnos are Ottawa County residents that, quote, are seeking to ensure their public representatives comply with the OMA and the state constitution, end of quote. That is according to a statement that was sent out by our friends at Progress Michigan, which assisted with research and financial support for the case. Yeah, Lonnie Scott's coming after Ottawa County, and they better run. I got news for you. I've known Lonnie for a long time, and he's relentless. I'm going to enjoy it when he roasts them. It's going to be great. Let me continue the story here. The Open Meetings Act requires public bodies to make decisions in public with some limited exceptions for closed sessions. Any meetings involving a quorum of the board, the minimum number of members required to vote, must be held in public, and notice and an agenda must be provided. Supporters of Ottawa Impact argue the commissioners weren't technically office holders before January 3rd and therefore could not have violated the OMA even if they met or made decisions prior to taking office, including naming a chairman and selecting new council. The complaint argues the Ottawa Impact commissioners were a de facto public body subject to the OMA beginning November 9th, the day after the general election, because during that period, they, 1, constituted a majority and quorum of the incoming Ottawa County Board, being 9 of 11 members. 2, performed government functions by meeting and communicating in person or electronically to deliberate and make decisions on public policy. 3, exercised government authority by directing Ottawa County employees to carry out their decisions, orders that were obeyed. The lawsuit claims, quote, when the Ottawa 9, that's referring to the 8 Ottawa Impact-backed commissioners and 1 Ottawa Impact-endorsed commissioner, failed to inform the people of Ottawa County of the governmental decisions being made by the Ottawa 9 between November 8, 2022 and January 3, 2023, the people of Ottawa County were denied their right to petition the government under Article 1, subsection 3, end of quote. During the meeting in question, the board made sweeping changes to how county government operates without prior acknowledgement on the public agenda, changing board rules to make it easier to make last-minute adjustments. After being sworn in, commissioners fired Administrator John Shea and replaced him with former Republican candidate John Gibbs without conducting a public interview, eliminated the county's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, chose a new health director to replace the already named successor to Lisa Stefanowski, Adeline Hambley, whose appointment had been approved by the state, replaced the county's council with Coleman Legal Group, and changed the county's vision statement to Where Freedom Rings. On January 4th, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announced that her office was reviewing the actions taken during the meeting to determine if the Open Meetings Act was violated. After a nearly 6-week review, she announced February 16th that although the Ottawa Impact Commissioner's conduct was a, quote, blatant violation of the public's trust in the tenets of government transparency, end of quote, it didn't technically violate state law. Nessel planned to urge state lawmakers to view Ottawa County as a reason to strengthen sunshine laws, which include the Open Meetings Act and the state's Freedom of Information Act. Dana Nessel told the Holland Sentinel, quote, there's no question that there were things that occurred involving this county commission that were really disturbing, end of quote. In an interview with the Sentinel, Nessel noted that Ottawa County residents could still pursue legal action which could set new precedent for what commissioners can and can't do before taking office. Lonnie Scott, executive director of Progress Michigan, said, quote, despite their cries for government transparency, Ottawa Impact has shown from the very beginning that they prefer to make their most sweeping decisions under the cloak of secrecy, end of quote. Scott added, quote, Michigan's laws and our Constitution are in place to ensure the public have input in the decisions being made by their representatives. By choosing to conceal their agenda and decision-making from the residents of Ottawa County, the Ottawa Impact majority running the commission has violated the Open Meetings Act and they must be held accountable. End of quote. The complaint seeks to invalidate all decisions made by the commission January 3rd, as well as reimbursement of court costs. Ottawa Impact is an upstart far-right political group born from clashes over the county's COVID-19 mitigation mandates in 2020. Its founders, Joe Moss and Sylvia Rodea, were unsuccessful in suing the previous Board of Commissioners and the county's former health officer. In response, they targeted seats on the board in 2022, recruiting like-minded candidates who agreed traditional Republicans weren't enforcing true conservative policies. They successfully defeated 8 incumbent Republicans in the August primary. The latest lawsuit includes District 6 Commissioner Kyle Terpstra as part of the Ottawa Impact bloc. Terpstra was endorsed by Ottawa Impact during the campaign season, but didn't sign the contract the group requires for its candidates. Those who signed the contract received Ottawa Impact's financial backing, including campaign flyers, billboards, and website support. Ottawa County's health officer, Adeline Hambly, is also suing 7 of 8 OI-backed commissioners on the board. In the lawsuit filed February 10th, Hambly claims Ottawa Impact commissioners have repeatedly interfered with her ability to do her job and have overreached their authority by attempting to limit her state-authorized health duties. On March 2nd, Hambly's attorney successfully obtained a temporary restraining order preventing commissioners from removing her from her position after Hambly expressed fears that actions taken by the board at a meeting February 28th were intended to nullify her appointment as health officer. A written resolution for Hambly's appointment was prepared ahead of the previous board's December 13th meeting. When former Commissioner Phil Kyers made the verbal motion to bring the issue to a vote, he verbalized the move was, quote, contingent upon approval by the Board of Commissioners, end of quote, in addition to being approved by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Ottawa Impact commissioners forced through a 6-5 vote in late February to correct the December 13th resolution because it, quote, did not accurately reflect the motion and vote that took place because it improperly omitted the first contingency, end of quote. Hambly's attorney, Sarah Riley Howard, warned Ottawa County's corporate counsel, Jack Jordan, in an email hours before the vote took place that changing the resolution would violate the state's Open Meetings Act because minutes from that meeting were approved by the new board January 10th. It's not yet known if the action taken February 28th will be challenged in court. The judge's temporary restraining order prevents the board from taking any actions to remove Hambly from her position until a hearing takes place, which has now been rescheduled for March 31st. At that hearing, the order could be extended or dropped depending on the outcome. Well, we're hoping that it gets extended. As a matter of fact, Ottawa Impact went to court because they were trying to get that lawsuit, the Adeline Hambly lawsuit, thrown out entirely. Then we have another story from Sarah Leach at the Holland Sentinel. It was reported earlier in the week that District 4 Commissioner Jacob Bonema announced that he was separating himself from Ottawa Impact, and we will get into that in just a minute here, but there's some more shenanigans that have been going on with Ottawa Impact. This time it has to do with the county's Housing Commission. Republican commissioners aren't the only ones distancing themselves from Ottawa Impact this week. Following attempts to remove him from his longtime subcommittee, Ottawa County's lone Democratic commissioner is also taking a stand. By the way, they were successful in removing him from the Housing Commission, which he restarted. In a social media post Monday, March 13th, District 3 Commissioner Doug Zylstra implied the Ottawa Impact majority of the board plans to remove him from the county's Housing Commission, a post he's held since the commission was revived in 2019. He posted on Twitter this, quote, at tomorrow's meeting on Agenda Item 9B, we will be asked to consider a recommendation to update the composition of the Housing Commission. To give a more ample view of this issue, I have asked that the following document be placed in the board packet as public information. And then he posts the document in question. By the way, Zylstra was not the only one that was removed from the Housing Commission. 2 other commissioners were removed, and they were replaced with 2 builders and John Gibbs, the county supervisor. Now, that's important because of the argument that they make in getting rid of Zylstra. Let me continue here. Tuesday's packet included a 1985 legal opinion from then Michigan Attorney General Frank J. Kelly, concluding a member of a county board of commissioners cannot simultaneously be a member of the county housing commission because they, quote, are incompatible and may not be simultaneously occupied by the same person, end of quote. Zylstra, one of 5 members of the Ottawa County Housing Commission, is the only sitting member who is also a current county commissioner. In his tweet, Zylstra said he requested a letter he sent to other commissioners be added to the packet, arguing the Kelly opinion is outdated and no longer applicable. Zylstra highlighted Michigan Senate Bill 284 of 2009, which amended state law to name a number of public entities on which public officers could also serve without creating incompatibility issues. The bill was signed into law by then Governor Jennifer Granholm on January 4th, 2010. Zylstra wrote to the board, quote, since the Ottawa County Housing Commission was created under that provision and current state law maintains MCL 15.183 subsection 3 to include housing commissions as exempted bodies, the question as to whether county commissioners may also concurrently serve as housing commissioners would seem to be resolved in the affirmative, end of quote. He added, quote, however, if there is further doubt, it may be advantageous for us to have the current Attorney General revisit this and issue a new opinion based on current state law, end of quote. Independent of the conflicting legal opinions, the county has language in its Housing Commission Operations Ordinance that says the board, quote, may remove any member of the Housing Commission for any reason, end of quote, at the request of the board chair. The other members of the Housing Commission are Virginia Beard, who works in the Hope College's Political Science Department, Holly Cole, Vice President of Grants and Programs at the Grand Haven Area Community Foundation, Thomas Reensma, Senior Attorney at Skolton Fant, and County Deputy Administrator Patrick Waterman. Zylstra's comments came on the heels of District 4 Commissioner Jacob Bonema's public statement detailing his separation from Ottawa Impact after he questioned several actions taken by the OI majority. Commissioner Bonema said he will move forward as an independent conservative, quote, still committed to support traditional conservative values, free speech, free markets, no medical mandates without informed consent, low taxes, pro-life, pro-family, pro-business, full support of public safety, and the individual right to keep and bear arms, end of quote. Oh, brother. I'm going to separate myself, but I'm still going to act like them. Yeah, you're really separating yourself, aren't you, buddy? Yeah, I don't think you are. I think you're still in lockstep with the rest of the OI commissioners there, Mr. Bonema. And I use the term Mr. very, very loosely. 2 additional commissioners, both Republican, have said they've either never been or are no longer affiliated with the group. District 6 Commissioner Kyle Terpstra confirmed to the Sentinel that he never signed Ottawa Impact's contract, a requirement to receive financial and campaign support, nor has he ever accepted funding from the group. District 7 Commissioner Rebecca Curran told the Sentinel in March that she initially was affiliated with Ottawa Impact but withdrew last spring. She did not receive campaign support from the Ottawa Impact Political Action Committee and did not have a website managed by the organization. As we mentioned, the board is facing 2 separate lawsuits filed in the past month, both challenging actions from the board's inaugural meeting January 3rd. The lawsuit includes the county health officer, Adeline Hambley, suing the commissioners, which we mentioned earlier. Then we mentioned the citizen group lawsuit. And actually, let's get on to Adeline Hambley's lawsuit. Sarah Leach has this update. This is from March 14th. 7 commissioners being sued by Ottawa County's health officer have asked a Muskegon County judge to dismiss the claim, saying she was never appointed to the position in 2022 and therefore lacks legal standing. In a filing Friday, March 10th, Coleman Legal Group filed a motion for summary disposition, asking the court to decide the case without a trial based on papers filed by either side. Ottawa County Health Officer Adeline Hambly filed the lawsuit February 10th in Ottawa County's 20th Circuit Court, claiming several Ottawa Impact-linked commissioners have repeatedly interfered with her ability to do her job and have overreached their authority by attempting to limit her state-authorized health duties. The case was assigned to Muskegon Circuit Court Judge Jenny McNeil after all Ottawa County judges recused themselves. Hambly's lawsuit names Board Chair Joe Moss, Vice Chair Sylvia Rodea, and Commissioners Lucy Ebel, Gretchen Cosby, Roger Belknap, Allison Miedema, and Rebecca Kern, all of whom voted to demote Hambly at the board's inaugural meeting January 3rd. Of course, they mentioned that Kern has since clarified that she withdrew from Ottawa Impact in the spring of 2022. The lawsuit argues the board improperly demoted Hambly to interim health officer, a constructive termination on January 3rd, intending to replace her with their preferred health officer candidate, Nathaniel Kelly, who aligns with their beliefs and values and has absolutely no experience as a public health officer. None whatsoever. Kelly has been vocal about his anti-mask and anti-vaccine stances. The HVAC health and safety manager has no previous work history in public health and said he would recommend kits for individuals infected by COVID-19 with vitamins, ivermectin, and neti pots, but not masking or social distancing. In other words, this nut job wants to kill people because that is what is going to happen. If people follow his advice, they are going to die. Jesus Christ. The move to challenge Hambly's legal standing as the official health officer was expected after Moss and Rodea, along with corporate legal counsel Jack Jordan of Coleman Legal Group, assured other commissioners at a February 28th meeting that a correction to the December board resolution that first appointed Hambly was merely a matter of cleaning up the record. Those opposed to the move questioned the necessity of the correction and asked if there was a larger motive. Others critical of the move said changing meeting minutes after they've been approved is a direct violation of Michigan's Open Meetings Act. Moss, Rodea, and Jordan repeatedly stated the move was simply to align the wording of the resolution, the minutes, and the video. When asked directly if there would be additional action, Jordan said it was up to the board. Joe Moss didn't directly answer the question. Well, we know what we're not going to take any action. We're not going to do anything. Yeah, that's how I feel about that. Let me continue here. The motion was approved on a 6-5 vote with Moss, Rodea, Cosby, Ebel, and Belknap, and Miedema voting yes. Commissioners Kyle Terpstra, Doug Zylstra, Jacob Bonema, Roger Bergman, and Rebecca Kern voted no. On March 2nd, Judge McNeil granted Hambly a temporary restraining order preventing commissioners from removing her from her position until after a March 31st hearing. In that filing, Hambly said she feared the vote on February 28th was an effort to rewrite history and nullify her hiring in order to gain an advantage in the lawsuit. Now, Coleman Legal Group, representing Ottawa Impact commissioners in the lawsuit, is in fact arguing the action taken on February 28th nullified Hambly's hiring and therefore undoes her appointment. Coleman Legal Group wrote in a filing March 10th, quote, "This case is predicated on Hambly's false assertion that she has been appointed permanent Ottawa County Health Officer. She is not and never has been. Hambly's complaint suffers from a complete lack of allegations, evidence, and legal foundation." End of quote. Oh, really? Bullshit! I've been wanting to do that ever since I started recording today. Let me continue here. The Ottawa Impact commissioners argue the resolution approving Hambly's appointment on December 13th, quote, "did not accurately reflect the actual motion and vote that took place at the meeting." End of quote. Bullshit! They claim former Commissioner Phil Kyers didn't read the resolution verbatim as it was written and prepared for the meeting. The appointment was, quote, "contingent upon approval by the Board of Commissioners," end of quote, in addition to being approved by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and that Hambly pass educational requirements and a background check. Even though the board voted to approve the resolution, Coleman Legal Group argues it didn't count as the approval required. Now, how does that work? In its Friday motion, Coleman Legal Group wrote, quote, "The resolution did not include the first contingency and thus violated the Open Meetings Act. Therefore, the current Board of Commissioners on February 28th corrected the prior resolution to reflect the actual vote taken on the motion regarding Ms. Hambly, i.e. the corrected resolution included the requirement for approval by the Board of Commissioners. This correction merely took the exact word-for-word language from the official meeting minutes and video record to ensure the resolution explicitly and correctly matched that language." End of quote. Yeah, really. Oh boy, I can see that the BS meter is going to get worn out today. Kyers, who is no longer a board member, has addressed the board during public comment, saying the previous board never intended to vote again, which District 10 Commissioner Roger Bergman, District 6 Commissioner Kyle Terpstra, and District 3 Commissioner Doug Zylstra, all members of the previous and current board, confirmed during the board's discussion. Bergman said, quote, "I can guarantee all 11 of us at that meeting voted to hire Adeline that day." End of quote. Terpstra said, quote, "I think all of us up here as commissioners understand why this was brought to us. I'm not going to speak to that, but I believe it's a pretty big Hail Mary. I don't think it's going to land. I believe it's probably going to land us in a harder situation going forward. I don't think this is going to be helping us out. I think it's going to be hurting us." End of quote. District 4 Commissioner Jacob Bonema said during the meeting he felt it was crossing the line to alter items approved by the previous board. He announced on March 13th that he had severed his relationship with Ottawa Impact and will be moving forward as an independent conservative. In a response filed on March 13th, Hambly's lawyer, Sarah Riley Howard, pointed out the commissioner's position has conveniently changed. Howard wrote in her latest filing, quote, "Defendant's apparent position developed since plaintiff filed her complaint is now that plaintiff was not effectively appointed as health officer. Defendants now have disputed only that Hambly was ever the lawful health officer of Ottawa County. This is a factual allegation that defendants manufactured with a post hoc 6-5 board motion on February 28, 2023, creating the revisionist resolution." End of quote. Howard said the commissioners don't directly dispute the claim they can't fire Hambly without due process, which would require a public hearing and provide the opportunity for her to have legal counsel present. That's a position two attorneys have shared with the county previously. Both former corporate counsel Doug Van Essen in 2020 and former Republican State Attorney General Mike Cox in a parallel legal opinion in 2021 said the board could only remove the health officer if she was, quote, "incompetent to execute properly the duties of the office," end of quote, or if she was, quote, "guilty of official misconduct or habitual or willful neglect of duty," end of quote, but said the board could only pursue the latter two reasons after a hearing in which the health officer and her legal counsel could be heard. Quote, "Of note, defendants have not disputed that they could not fire or demote Hambly without a just cause hearing if she was indeed the lawful health officer by virtue of the original resolution's operation as of January 3rd, 2023. Of course, denying the just cause status of the health officer would be difficult for defendants since Ottawa County solicited and received two separate legal opinions in the very recent past confirming this conclusion." End of quote. The commissioners argue neither of the two previous legal opinions cite a statute nor previous legal opinion, nor does either use the phrase just cause. Howard said Moss recognized Hambly as the official health officer in an email dated December 19th when he wrote in part, quote, "You have been appointed as the new health officer," end of quote. Yeah, right there's the sticking point. That's going to trip them up. They're going to lose. Ottawa Impact is going to lose. He went on to request a meeting with her to, quote, "dispel one of the myths that our local media has been reporting regarding health department funding in 2023. Several people have brought this concern to me, and I want to make sure you hear from me directly," end of quote. A second lawsuit from a citizen group was filed against the entire board March 8th, alleging the Ottawa Impact majority violated the Open Meetings Act at its inaugural meeting by communicating and making decisions behind closed doors beforehand. The lawsuit names the board as an entity and does not identify individual commissioners. So there you go there. And they might have to add this latest thing on February 28th because that's also allegedly a violation of Michigan's Open Meetings Act. You can't go back and redo history. You can't do it. You're not allowed to. Unreal. So, yes, we will keep you up to date on the continuing saga of As Ottawa County Turns. We'll probably have an update for you in the next week or so. All right, let's go ahead to our next story here. This is Hannah Lang and Nupur Anand writing for Reuters. This is dated March 12th. State regulators closed New York-based Signature Bank on Sunday, the third largest failure in U.S. banking history, 2 days after authorities shuttered Silicon Valley Bank in a collapse that stranded billions in deposits. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation took control of Signature, which had $110.36 billion in assets and $88.59 billion in deposits at the end of last year. That's according to New York State's Department of Financial Services. In a joint statement, the U.S. Treasury Department and other bank regulators said that all of the depositors of Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank will be made whole and, quote, no losses will be borne by the taxpayer, end of quote. Employees appeared to gather at the company's Manhattan headquarters for meetings on Sunday, ordering catering from Carmine's, an Italian restaurant, and Starbucks coffee, according to a Reuters reporter on the scene. People trickled out of the building after the news of the closure was announced. Representatives for the lender did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Signature's failure followed Silicon Valley Bank's Friday shutdown, the second largest in U.S. history behind Washington Mutual, which collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis. Investors were unnerved by the speed at which startup-focused SVB, the 16th largest lender in the U.S., was toppled by customer withdrawals. The episode last week erased more than $100 billion in market value from U.S. banks, prompting swift action from government officials over the weekend to try and restore confidence in the financial system. The FDIC established a bridge successor bank on Sunday, which enabled customers to access their funds on Monday. Signature Bank's depositors and borrowers will automatically become customers of the bridge bank. That is according to the FDIC. The regulator named former Fifth Third Bancorp Chief Executive Greg Carmichael as CEO of the Bridge Bank. Silicon Valley Bank customers were able to access their deposits Monday. The federal government also announced actions to shore up deposits and try and stem any broader fallout. Signature was a commercial bank with private client offices in New York, Connecticut, California, Nevada, and North Carolina, and had 9 national business lines, including commercial real estate and digital asset banking. As of September, almost a quarter of its deposits came from the cryptocurrency sector, but the bank announced in December that it would shrink its crypto-related deposits by $8 billion. Signature Bank announced in February that its chief executive officer, Joseph DiPaolo, would transition into a senior advisor role in 2023 and would be succeeded by the bank's chief operating officer, Eric Howell. DiPaolo has served as president and CEO since Signature's inception in 2001. The bank had a long-standing relationship with Donald Trump and his family, providing Trump and his business with checking accounts and financing several of the family's ventures. Signature Bank cut ties with Trump in 2021 following the deadly January 6 traitorous riots on Capitol Hill. They also urged Trump to resign at that point. I added traitorous. In a statement, New York Governor Kathy Hochul said she hoped the U.S. government's actions on Sunday would provide, quote, increased confidence in the stability of our banking system. Many depositors at these banks are small businesses, including those driving the innovation economy, and their success is key to New York's robust economy, end of quote. Officials said on Sunday that shareholders and certain unsecured debt holders of Signature Bank, as well as those of Silicon Valley Bank, would not be protected, and that senior management of both banks has been removed. Officials added that any losses to the FDIC's deposit insurance fund used to support uninsured depositors will be recovered by a special assessment on banks as required by law. Now, why do banks have federal deposit insurance on them? You can thank a Democrat. You can thank FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. As part of the New Deal, besides starting Social Security and all the other programs, one of them that was a linchpin for FDR was the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation because of the run on the banks during the Great Depression of 1929. He never wanted that to ever happen again. So that's why you have FDIC insurance. And if you vote Republican enough times, they'll take that away from you too. I guarantee it. All right, let's go to our next story here. This is Hugh Lowell writing for The Guardian. This is dated March 15th. The legal problems for Donald Trump continue to grow and grow. Listen to this, folks. Federal prosecutors in New York involved in the criminal investigation into Donald Trump's social media company last year started examining whether it violated money laundering statutes in connection with the acceptance of $8 million with suspected Russian ties. That is according to sources familiar with the matter. The company, Trump Media, which owns Trump's Truth Social platform, initially came under criminal investigation over its preparations for a potential merger with a blank check company called Digital World that was also the subject of an earlier investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Toward the end of last year, federal prosecutors started examining two loans totaling $8 million wired to Trump Media through the Caribbean from two obscure entities that both appear to be controlled in part by the relation of an ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. That is according to sources. The expanded nature of the criminal investigation, which has not been previously reported, threatens to delay the completion of the merger between Trump Media and Digital World, which would provide the company and Truth Social with up to $1.3 billion in capital, in addition to a stock market listing. Even if Trump Media and its officers face no criminal exposure for the transactions, the optics of borrowing money from potentially unsavory sources through opaque conduits could cloud Trump's image as he seeks to recapture the White House in 2024. The extent of the exposure for Trump Media and its officers for money laundering remains unclear. The statutes broadly require prosecutors to show that defendants knew the money was the proceeds of some form of unlawful activity and the transaction was designed to conceal its source. But legal experts said money laundering prosecutions are typically based on circumstantial evidence and can be based on materials that show that the money in question was unlikely to have legitimate origins. The first $2 million payment to Trump Media came in December 2021 when the company was on the brink of collapse after the planned merger with Digital World that would have unlocked millions for the company was delayed when the SEC opened an inquiry into whether the arrangement broke regulatory rules. Trump Media needed a bridge loan to keep the company afloat, but it struggled to get financing until Digital World's chief executive Patrick Orlando sourced a $2 million loan wired from Paxim Bank registered in Dominica. That is according to the wire transfer receipt reviewed by The Guardian. The wire transfer identified Paxim Bank as the beneficial owner, although the promissory note identified an entity called ES Family Trust as the lender. The transfer receipt showed that 2 months later, an unexpected second $6 million payment arrived in Trump Media's account from ES Family Trust. Will Wilkerson, who was Trump Media's co-founder, who has now been ousted from the company and is now a whistleblower, said in an interview that in both instances, Orlando declined to provide details about the true identity of the lenders or the origin of the money to Trump Media executives. Though the two payments to Trump Media ostensibly came from two separate entities, First Paxum Bank and Second ES Family Trust. The trustee of ES Family Trust, a person called Angel Pacheco, appears to have simultaneously been a director of Paxum Bank. The Russian connection is being examined by prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, centers on a part owner of Paxum Bank, an individual named Anton Postolnikov, who appears to be a relation of Putin ally Alexander Smirnov. Smirnov, who heads the Russia-controlled maritime company Rosmerport, worked in the central office of the Russian government until 2017. Before that, Smirnov was the first Deputy Minister of Justice of Russia until 2014, and for most of Putin's first 2 terms as president, Smirnov served in the executive office of the president. A spokesman for the Justice Department, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and outside counsel for Trump media declined to comment about the investigation. Rosmerport and Paxum Bank did not respond to requests for comment as well. According to Wilkerson, the obscure origins of the $8 million loans caused alarm at Trump media, and in the spring of 2022, Trump media's then chief financial officer Philip Juhan weighed returning the money. But Wilkerson said the money was never returned, in part because losing $8 million out of the roughly $12 million cash that Trump media had in its accounts at that time would have placed significant stress on its financial situation. Prosecutors appear to have also taken a special interest in the payments because the offshore Paxum Bank has a history of providing banking services for the pornography and sex worker industries, which makes it higher risk of engaging in money laundering and other illicit financing. There appears to have been some awareness at Trump media that the first $2 million was to come through because Trump's eldest son, Don Jr., who joined the board with Trump ally Kash Patel and former Republican-turned-Trump media chief executive Devin Nunes, had confirmed to the company's lawyers to proceed with the transaction. In a December 24, 2021 email seen by The Guardian, John Haley, outside counsel for Trump media, said, quote, "Just wanted to keep you in the loop. No guarantee that these will get signed and funded, but we remain hopeful." End of quote. Donald Trump Jr. responded to that email, quote, "Thanks, John. Much appreciated." End of quote. Since Orlando, who arranged the $8 million financing, is an SEC licensed broker-dealer, he would be subject to SEC rules governing anti-money laundering and know-your-customer requirements that mandate due diligence of investors to combat the proliferation of illicit money. As a private company arranging private loans, the obligations for Trump media to vet the financing under the SEC rules are less clear, but the securities regulations are separate to the U.S. criminal money laundering statutes, which apply universally. A spokesman for Donald Trump Jr. declined to comment. Orlando, Nunes, Patel, and Juhan did not respond to requests for comment. Federal prosecutors' interest in the 2 payments appears to have started when Wilkerson, through his attorneys Patrick Mincy, Stephen Bell, and Phil Brewster, alerted the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York to the payments on October 23, 2022. Trump was the chairman of Trump Media at the time, though it was unclear whether he was aware of the opaque nature of the 2 loans. Wilkerson said that Trump typically did not seem to be particularly interested in managing the day-to-day running of Trump Media. Wilkerson said, but Trump was interested in the deal because he got to own 90% of the shares without putting any money into the company. In other words, atypical Donald Trump. According to one source familiar with the matter, however, Trump invested some money into Digital World, which could allow him to cash out twice in the event the merger was consummated. So there you go. Once again, atypical Donald Trump. All right, let's go to our next segment.
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. We've got 2 winners for you this week, so every time that we have 2 winners, we allow Wade Garrett to chime in.
The double douche.
Who is that guy?
Gentlemen, Wade Garrett.
Holy sh**.
Exactly right.
So Wade Garrett serves up on a platter winner number one this week, Lapeer County Prosecutor John Miller. What did he do to deserve this honor? I have this story. This is Ron French writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated March 13th. This should scare the living hell out of any librarian in the country. Listen to this, folks. Lapeer County Prosecutor John Miller says he may file criminal charges against employees or officials of the Lapeer District Library if an LGBTQ-themed graphic novel isn't removed from the shelves. Miller told Bridge, Michigan Monday the illustrations in the book Gender Queer, a memoir, could rise to the level of accosting, enticing, or soliciting a child for immoral purpose, a felony punishable by up to 4 years in prison. Miller said, quote, "I hope that is not the outcome of this. I want this to come to a conclusion," end of quote, that the community agrees on that would, quote, remove the book from the library, end of quote. The threat of criminal charges against librarians is believed to be a first in the state and is an escalation of cultural wars that have spread across public and school libraries in Michigan over the past year. The book, an LGBTQ-themed graphic novel with illustrations of sex acts, has caused controversy in libraries in Michigan and across the country, and Miller's threat follows a controversy over the book that has brewed since fall in this rural county in Michigan's thumb. Miller cited the specific criminal code 750.145A he believed the book's presence in a public library could violate. The law is often associated with police sting operations of adults who prey on minors, barring enticing anyone under 16 to commit an immoral act, to submit to an act of sexual intercourse or an act of gross indecency, or to any other act of depravity or delinquency. Amy Churchill, the director of the library, said she's undeterred by Miller's threat. She told Bridge, quote, "I have heard if he could, he'd arrest me. He's trying to intimidate us. I am not hard to find. If Mr. Miller wishes to arrest me, I am in my office working for the patrons and staff of the Lapeer District Library Monday through Friday," end of quote. Miller said he, along with other county officials, will urge the library to remove the book at a Lapeer District Library Board meeting Thursday evening, which is occurring this evening as we record this show on Thursday, March 16th. We will have an update on next week's show. Library officials are considering a patron request to remove Genderqueer from the library's collection. According to PEN America, a group that advocates for writers, said that Genderqueer, a memoir, was the most banned book in school libraries in 2022. The American Library Association said that it was the most challenged book in the country. The graphic novel is the story of author Maya Kobabe's coming of age as non-binary and includes illustrations of sex acts. Genderqueer was one of the books that caused an uproar in Ottawa County last fall when voters defunded the Patmos Library. That library is operating on donations for now, but officials do not believe they can stay open indefinitely without taxpayer support. No criminal charges against librarians have been publicly contemplated there, but library officials have received several threats of violence. Let me add, credible threats of violence. Keeping books some consider inappropriate away from children is drawing attention among some in Lansing as well. As we mentioned on last week's episode of Southpaws, Representative Neil Frisk, Republican of Charlevoix, has sponsored House Bill 4136, which would require public libraries to keep obscene books in an area where children do not have access. In response, Deb Mikula, the executive director of the Michigan Library Association, said that most public libraries are not designed in a way that would allow a restricted book area. Lapeer District Library serves about 2/3 of Lapeer County, east of Flint. There are 7 small branch libraries in the district with a main library in the city of Lapeer. Churchill told Bridge, Michigan, that the library purchased a copy of Genderqueer in the fall of 2022 at the request of a patron. Soon after, some residents began objecting to the book. One resident checked the book out and took it to the police, according to Churchill. The police returned the book to the library. Yeah, because people in Lapeer County don't have anything better to do with their time than to be homophobes and transphobes. Yes, I said it. I don't care. Miller is a Republican. Gee, big surprise there. Who won election as prosecutor in November. In January, 4 weeks after taking office, Miller filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the library seeking records connected to the consideration, approval, and purchase of genderqueer, which he misidentified as gender queen because Republicans are also very ignorant and stupid. There is a difference. The public records also asked for a record of, quote, who voted for and against the addition of the book, end of quote, to the library. Here's the thing. Lapeer's library board doesn't approve individual book purchases. According to library's policies, Churchill, as director, has final approval of purchases. Churchill said she was shocked by the FOIA request sent on official stationery of the Lapeer County Prosecutor's Office, since she had never spoken to Miller or anyone in his office, and the information could have been gleaned with a phone call. The FOIA letter stated that Miller would pay personally for any charges incurred by the library in fulfilling the request. Yeah, because this is a personal crusade. This has nothing to do with the voters in Lapeer County. This is a personal religious crusade. Christo-fascism has come to Lapeer. Churchill said, quote, a FOIA is an extremely aggressive way to communicate with someone. Usually you'd try to talk to them first, end of quote. Miller said he became involved when several county commissioners approached him with copies of books that had been checked out from the Lapeer Library. He said he dismissed concerns about 2 of the books, one with LGBTQ themes but no illustrations, and a second that had to do with race relations. The third was genderqueer, with illustrations that Miller said shocked him. Quote, and that takes a lot for a prosecutor. I'm an attorney. I've studied the Constitution. I've passed the bar exam. My job is to take a position that protects our innocent and our youth. And if this isn't child sexual abusive material, it borders on it. End of quote. I have a question for Mr. Miller. How many times did it take for you to pass your bar exam? 2, 3, 4, more? I'd like to know. Miller said the book's target audience is teenagers and that to him, the drawings of sex acts appear to involve prepubescent boys. To the prosecutor, the book's availability to youth could meet the bar for a crime in Michigan because to him, the book entices underage teens to engage in sex acts. Miller said, quote, while I hope not to prosecute someone over this book, I feel it's part of the community's decision. This isn't about LGBTQ. This is about the exploitation of children. End of quote. No, it has to do with LGBTQ. And here's why. Churchill countered that Miller and other conservatives in the community are only objecting to an LGBTQ book with illustrations of sex acts, but not to books like The Joy of Sex, which depicts sex acts by heterosexual couples, which is also housed at the library. Churchill said that, quote, if anything, we have an underrepresentation of books about marginalized communities, end of quote, including the LGBTQ community. Gonna skip to the last paragraph in the story. The state of Georgia is considering a bill that would allow school librarians to be charged criminally for objectionable books. So are the states of Indiana, Texas, and Wyoming. Yeah, this is scary shit right here. I'm just going to be blunt about it. So, winner number 1, Lapeer County Prosecutor John Miller. Winner number 2 this week is college student Carson Briere, who is the son of Philadelphia Flyers general manager Danny Briere. I have this story. This is Mike Brem writing for USA Today. This is dated March 15th. Mercyhurst University hockey player Carson Briere, the son of Philadelphia Flyers interim general manager Danny Briere, and 2 other student athletes have been suspended after Briere pushed an unoccupied wheelchair down a flight of stairs at a bar. They destroyed this wheelchair that belongs to some poor girl that doesn't have legs. A video was posted on Twitter Tuesday by a person who said they worked at Sullivan's Pub in Erie, Pennsylvania, showing the incident that took place Saturday. The stairs lead to the restrooms, and the wheelchair's owner had been carried downstairs to use the facilities. In a statement Wednesday, the athletic department at the university said, quote, "After conducting an initial investigation into the incidents depicted on social media, the Mercyhurst Athletics Department has determined that 3 individuals in the video are student athletes. We have placed all 3 on interim suspension from their athletics teams per school policy, pending the outcome of the investigative process." End of quote. The 23-year-old Carson, who is in his 3rd season with the Mercyhurst hockey team, issued an apology on Wednesday. By the way, he supposedly issued an apology the night of the incident, but was very insincere, according to the owner of the wheelchair, which is how this ended up on Twitter. So I'm not even going to read it because he doesn't mean it. A GoFundMe page was set up to raise money to purchase a new wheelchair. The GoFundMe was cut off at $8,811. The wheelchair's owner went on social media to say that she would rather give the money, quote, "to those who need it," end of quote. Briere had been dismissed from the Arizona State hockey team in 2019 when he was a redshirt freshman for violating undisclosed team rules. That is according to the Erie Times News. So apparently this little prick hasn't learned his lesson yet. Well, I hope he does now. They ought to throw him out of college forever. God, what is wrong with people? You don't do that to somebody's wheelchair. I don't care what excuse you have. Oh, I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. No, you knew exactly what you were doing. You thought you were having fun with your little buddies. You got caught on video. You're not sorry that you did it. You're sorry you got caught. Period. End of story. So to Miller and Briere, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
That's exactly right. Show some compassion to people that can't help that they have physical disabilities, for God's sakes. That pisses me off. It really pisses me to the core of my human being. I want to real quickly get to our final story here. This is Anthony Izagiri and Brendan Farrington writing for the Associated Press. This is dated March 14th out of Tallahassee. This shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Florida Republicans on Tuesday advanced a proposal to ban classroom lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity through the 8th grade, expanding the controversial law critics call Don't Say Gay. The bill, which was approved by a House subcommittee, still must clear another committee before moving to the full House. Now listen to this one. This one should also scare the hell out of everybody. A separate House subcommittee approved a bill that would make it easier to sue journalists for defamation, a priority for Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who frequently criticizes what he calls legacy media. You're a legacy asshole, DeSantis, and that's exactly what you are. You are a death sentence. You are a death sentence to the state of Florida. You're going to be a death sentence to this country if you get elected president. Folks, you better wake up. This guy is a fascist. He wants to trample the First Amendment. He wants to shred it up. He doesn't care about the Constitution, just like all Republicans. That's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.